September 5th, 1977. Interstate 15, Escondido, California. Raymond Jingles Smith feels the engine rumble beneath him, his wife's arms wrapped tight around his waist. Beside him, Emerson Redbeard Morris rides in perfect formation, his own wife clinging to his back. The afternoon sun warms their leather jackets. Traffic flows steadily around them. The highway stretches endlessly ahead toward the horizon. They don't see the car accelerating behind them. They don't notice the window rolling down. An AR-15 appears in the opening. Gunfire rips through the air at 70 miles per hour. Chrome and leather tumble violently across asphalt. Screams mix with engine roar and the screech of brakes. Raymond Smith dies instantly, his body hitting the pavement before anyone can process what's happening. Emerson Morris follows hours later in a hospital bed, machines beeping their futile rhythm as doctors fight to save him. His wife will spend the rest of her life paralyzed from the waist down. Innocent civilians swerve desperately to avoid the carnage, their own lives forever changed by what they witnessed. This wasn't road rage. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't even a crime of passion. This was a calculated execution on a public freeway in broad daylight. One battle in a war most Americans never knew was happening. A war that would claim over 20 lives, leaving bodies scattered across California. A war that terrorized entire communities for years, turning neighborhoods into combat zones. A war that started over a patch on a jacket. Missed the button? Go ahead, subscribe now so you don't forget later. Let me show you what they died for, what families were destroyed over, what turned California streets into battlefields. 3 inches of fabric curved at the top, the word California stitched in bold block letters, a rocker worn proudly on a leather jacket, displayed on the back for all to see. To most people walking past on the street, it's nothing, a decoration, a logo, maybe a fashion statement. To the Hells Angels, it was the crown jewel of an empire built over decades of blood, intimidation, and absolute dominance. For years, no one outside their ranks dared wear that rocker, not in Los Angeles, not in San Diego, not anywhere in the state. It wasn't just a patch, it was a declaration of ownership. This state belongs to us. This territory is ours. This is our kingdom. Then came the Mongols, and they wore it anyway, refusing to bow to anyone. December 1969. A small room in Montebello, California. 10 men gather around a table, smoke hanging heavy in the air. Mostly Hispanic, mostly Vietnam veterans who had seen combat, who understood loyalty and brotherhood forged in fire. All outsiders, all rejected by the system. All share one bitter experience. The Hells Angels rejected them. Their skin too dark, their faces too unfamiliar, their backgrounds not fitting the mold the Angels demanded. So these men built their own brotherhood from scratch. They called themselves the Mongols. Their symbol told their story. A Mongol warrior, sunglasses reflecting the horizon, riding a chopper like it was a battlefield. Their motto captured their defiance. Respect few, fear none. A statement of independence, a promise to each other. A warning to anyone who might challenge them. At first, they were just riders, riding together through California's winding roads, partying together in small bars and backroom clubhouses, sharing stories of war and survival and the bonds forged in Vietnam's jungles. The streets of California had no idea this small band of men, these 10 outcasts from Montebello, was quietly plotting to rewrite the rules of the outlaw world. Then, in 1974, everything changed. A single vote, unanimous and irrevocable, the Mongols went outlaw. No longer just a club where men gathered to ride, no longer just a brotherhood of rejected veterans looking for belonging. Prisons became classrooms where the rules of street warfare were taught. Cells became recruitment halls where the ranks swelled with men hungry for purpose. Every handshake, every nod, every whispered conversation in San Luis Obispo's men's colony was a new soldier joining the ranks for the coming war. By the late 1970s, the Mongols were everywhere. Los Angeles, Long Beach, San Diego, San Fernando Valley, Bakersfield, and beyond. From one small clubroom in Montebello, they spread like wildfire across the state, each new chapter a foothold in territory the Angels thought they owned. But California already had a king, And kings don't share crowns, kings don't negotiate, kings don't compromise. In the mid-1970s, the Mongols began wearing the California rocker on their cuts, their leather vests that served as uniforms. At first, it was subtle, almost unnoticed by the public going about their daily lives. But inside the motorcycle world, among those who understood the code and the symbols, it was a provocation, a direct challenge to the Angels' authority, to everything they had built over 3 decades of dominance. Ultimatums followed swiftly, letters delivered in the dead of night, phone calls made from anonymous payphones, threats whispered in dimly lit bars where bikers gathered and walls had ears. The message was always the same: take off the rocker or face the consequences. The Mongols refused to remove the patch. They argued it symbolized not defiance, but equality, that California belonged to all outlaws, not just one club. Every refusal, every unbowed gesture, every Mongol who rode past an angel wearing that rocker stoked a fire the Angels had no intention of letting burn unchecked. Tensions escalated rapidly through 1976 and into 1977. Bar fights broke out over spilled drinks that weren't accidents, slashed tires discovered in parking lots, stolen motorcycles that disappeared without a trace. Clubhouses were vandalized with spray paint and broken windows, personal property destroyed in the night. Every act of sabotage was a message, a test of resolve, a warning to those who would ignore the rules that had governed the outlaw world for decades. Violence became the language of negotiation when words no longer carried weight. In early 1977, a swap meet in Anaheim erupted into chaos that would make headlines. Hundreds of bikers clashed in broad daylight, fists and pipes swinging, motorcycles overturned in the dirt, engines roaring in defiance as clubs faced off. No one died that day, but the lines had been drawn in blood and bruises. This was no longer about respect or honor. This was a war waiting to explode, and everyone in the outlaw world knew it. Then on July 7, 1977, in a quiet California meeting room filled with cigarette smoke and palpable tension, the Angels made it official. Chapter presidents from across the state gathered for the vote. The statement was single, sharp, and uncompromising, spoken aloud so every man present would understand the weight of what was about to happen. We're declaring war on the Mongols. The die had been cast. No turning back now. California became a battlefield, and every highway, every bar, every street corner was now contested territory. July 29, 1977, just 22 days after the declaration. Kern County, California. Alan Bishop rode down a rural highway, the morning sun glinting off his chrome handlebars. A car pulled alongside him, matching his speed. The window rolled down. Gunfire ripped through the air, shattering the peaceful morning. Bishop's body hit the asphalt before anyone nearby could react, before anyone could even understand what was happening. One shot had shattered a life, ended a brother's journey, but it was only the first move in a war that would consume California for years to come. Weeks later came the Freeway execution I told you about. Raymond, Jingles, Smith, and Emerson Redbeard Morris gunned down on Interstate 15 with their wives riding behind them, witnesses to their own husbands' murders. Smith died instantly, his body tumbling across lanes of traffic. Morris, critically wounded and fighting for every breath, would follow hours later in a hospital bed as doctors worked frantically to save him. One wife paralyzed for the rest of her life, her world forever changed in seconds. The message the Angels sent was crystal clear. No one was safe. Not on the open road, not with your family, nowhere. September 9th. Lemon Grove. A community gathered to mourn, to honor loyalty and brotherhood in the way outlaws do. Hundreds of Mongols stood in respectful silence as the caskets were lowered into the ground, brothers saying goodbye to brothers who had fallen in this senseless war. Then a van parked nearby exploded without warning, packed with nails and metal shards designed to maximize carnage. 2 Mongols fell, wounded by flying debris. A civilian father, there simply to pay his respects, caught shrapnel in his leg. Even funerals, even sacred moments of grief could not escape this war. The rules of engagement had been completely obliterated. September 24th. Highland Park, Los Angeles. Henry Jimenez walked into a motorcycle shop for routine maintenance on his bike. Just another day. Just another errand. A tire had been rigged with explosives, waiting patiently for its target. The blast tore through the shop like a freight train, windows shattering outward, metal twisting and screaming. The explosion claimed Jimenez instantly and a 15-year-old boy named Raymond Hernandez, a neighborhood kid who had wandered into the shop to watch the mechanics work, fascinated by motorcycles the way boys often are. A child with no ties to the gangs, no place in this war, no understanding of the hatred that had just ended his life. Death had found the innocent, and the shockwaves rippled across every community in Southern California. Authorities could no longer ignore the carnage spreading across their jurisdictions. October 7th, law enforcement agencies launched a massive, coordinated crackdown. 32 Hells Angels arrested in dawn raids across multiple counties. Chapter leaders, including Thomas James Crunch Ranulli, facing attempted murder charges and conspiracy. And yet, despite the arrests, despite the press conferences and tough talk from politicians, the violence didn't stop. Bombs kept exploding. Shootings continued. Retaliation followed retaliation in an endless cycle. The bloodshed was already beyond containment, beyond any illusion of control. October 11th, 1977, San Diego. A Mongols member drove his car into a repair shop for routine maintenance. The mechanic froze. 6 sticks of dynamite, wired to detonate the moment the engine turned. The discovery sent shockwaves through the city. Forensic teams traced the explosives. Fingerprints led straight to the San Diego chapter president of the Hells Angels. Dynamite that could obliterate a vehicle, a house, a street, all in the hands of men who had declared war over a patch. The Mongols responded with their own campaign of calculated violence. Retaliatory bombs planted under cars and outside homes. Ambushes planned with military precision. Carefully coordinated strikes became their new normal, their new way of life. Luis Gutierrez, a chapter president and high-value target, narrowly survived a car bombing outside his home by mere seconds, diving away from his vehicle just as it erupted in flames. Windows shattered throughout the neighborhood. Neighboring houses sustained damage from the blast wave. Innocent families' lives were disrupted, their sense of safety permanently destroyed. Civilians no longer felt safe anywhere in their own neighborhoods. Mechanics began refusing service to anyone wearing a patch, unwilling to become the next casualty. Shops shuttered their doors permanently. Streets emptied at night as fear coursed through communities like wildfire, spreading from block to block. Ordinary life dissolved under the crushing weight of this war. Parents kept children indoors and away from windows. Friends watched neighbors with suspicion, wondering who might be next, which house might explode, which street corner might erupt in gunfire. FBI infiltration operations over 10 months of undercover work uncovered a chilling reality that shocked even seasoned agents. Both clubs had militarized far beyond what anyone had imagined. Stockpiles of automatic weapons capable of sustained firefights, crates of explosives powerful enough to level buildings, tactical gear including body armor and night vision equipment, maps meticulously marked for ambush locations with careful notes about timing and escape routes, lists of targets with photographs and home addresses, contingency plans for various scenarios. This wasn't mere outlaw posturing or tough guy bravado. This was organized, tactical warfare conducted with military discipline and strategic planning. And yet, against all odds and defying every expert prediction, the Mongols were gaining ground steadily. The streets of California had transformed into a battlefield where the rules of engagement had vanished completely. Every strike, every bomb, every kill shifted the balance of power inch by bloody inch. The Mongols' rise defied logic, defied strategy, defied every expectation that experts and law enforcement had about how gang wars typically played out. By 1980, the California landscape of outlaw bikers had fundamentally shifted in ways no one had predicted. The Hells Angels, once untouchable kings of the road, were crumbling under the combined weight of arrests, internal betrayals, and relentless pressure from the Mongols. Their empire, built over decades on intimidation and tradition, was suddenly fractured and vulnerable. Every chapter felt the strain eating away at their foundation. Trust evaporated like morning fog, and old loyalties that had held for years became dangerous liabilities that could get you killed. The Mongols, meanwhile, were thriving. Younger, hungrier, and streetwise, they recruited heavily from gangs and prison networks. Men who didn't know how to ride a motorcycle when they joined were trained to navigate territory, handle weapons, and fight as soldiers in a decentralized army. By 1982, Southern California had become Mongol territory. Chapters outnumbered the Angels. Strategic hits, targeted assassinations, and calculated intimidation had shifted the balance. Then came Lemon Grove. Sergeant-at-Arms Fat Ray Piltz, a Hells Angels enforcer, was shot dead in a crowded biker bar. 5 Mongols members were indicted over the killing, and one, Bill Michaels, would serve 6 years. That single death echoed the broader message. The Angels were losing control. Faced with mounting casualties and diminishing influence, the Hells Angels approached the Mongols to negotiate a truce. Talks were tense, cautious, and fraught with the knowledge that any misstep could reignite a war that had already claimed too many lives. The deal was historic. The Mongols would keep the California rocker, the very symbol that had sparked the war, while the Angels retained control of Northern California. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, subscribe to the channel. There's more coming you won't want to miss. For the first time in history, the Hells Angels had been forced to surrender territory. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. The Mongols had proven that a smaller, marginalized group could not only survive, but strategically defeat a global criminal organization. But victory came at an unimaginable cost. Conservative estimates placed the death toll at over 20, including innocent civilians, wives, and teenagers caught in the crossfire. Entire communities were terrorized, families destroyed, and a generation marked by violence. The war had transformed California's outlaw culture forever. The Mongols had evolved from a small brotherhood into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The Hells Angels had suffered a public, strategic defeat. Law enforcement agencies re-examined their approach, realizing that biker clubs were capable of military-style operations, not mere barroom brawls. The California Biker War didn't just burn highways and streets. It redefined the rules of organized crime. Outlaw gangs weren't simply about rebellion anymore. They had learned to merge street tactics with military precision. Ambushes, explosives, and coordinated hits became standard tools, and law enforcement realized too late that biker wars were not chaotic, spur-of-the-moment violence. The Mongols, once a small, rejected brotherhood, had evolved into a transnational force. Chapters stretched across continents, alliances were forged with other enemies of the Angels, and their reputation for ruthless efficiency spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, the Hells Angels' aura of invincibility was shattered. No longer untouchable, their dominance was questioned, and rival gangs watched closely, learning that even the most fearsome empires could be challenged. Decades later, the rivalry reignited in spectacular fashion. The 2002 Laughlin River Run ended in a deadly shootout in a casino parking lot, leaving 3 dead. Security cameras captured every horrifying moment, a reminder that old scores die hard, and the feud that began with a simple patch was far from over. Federal authorities took notice. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives eventually designated the Mongols as America's most violent motorcycle gang, citing decades of bombings, assassinations, and tactical warfare. Their rise demonstrated a chilling truth. Organized crime could evolve, adapt, and exploit weaknesses in ways that were previously unimaginable. And if you've stayed this long, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. The next story is just as explosive. It had all started over a strip of cloth, a patch on a jacket, a symbol of pride and territory. But that patch became a catalyst for over 20 deaths, countless injuries, and years of war that would leave an indelible mark on California's criminal landscape. Even empires built on fear can fall, but the cost is always paid in blood. Families were destroyed, communities terrorized, and a generation of men learned that brotherhood could be both a shield and a weapon. Raymond Hernandez was 15 years old. He just wanted to watch mechanics work on motorcycles. He never wore a patch, never rode a bike, never chose a side. He died anyway. That's the real price of the California rocker. Not just the lives of those who fought for it, but the lives of those who never asked to be part of the war at all. The Forgotten War proved that ambition, strategy, and relentless determination could topple even the most established criminal empires. But it also proved something darker, that power, no matter how entrenched, is never guaranteed. And sometimes, the deadliest battles are fought over things most people would never notice: a patch on a jacket, a word on a rocker, a refusal to kneel. The streets of California still remember, and somewhere, on quiet roads where chrome once gleamed and engines once roared, the echoes of that forgotten war still linger.